We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
that's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom right here on the Lions of Liberty podcast, and really excited today to introduce you to today's guest. Before I get to talking about today's guest, though, I got to get through a couple really important housekeeping items here first. So first of all, the Lions of Liberty Pride, we are making some tweaks, some changes to our tier structure in the Pride. You know, if you join the Pride, you can join at $5, $10, $15, $25 and on from there, monthly subscription. We are making a change at our $10 level now. If you join at $10 or more, you are going to get access to 15% off coffee at Run Your Mouth Coffee. Run Your Mouth Coffee is a coffee company founded by myself and Ben Pangi. It's something we're very proud of, with a focus on uncensored speech and delicious, fresh roasted coffee. My favorite blend that we have there is called Rebellion Beans. The unique part about the Rebellion Beans is they are, before roasting, they sit in a bourbon barrel for 30 days. And then when you order, they're pulled out of that bourbon barrel, they are roasted, and they are sent to your doorstep. Just absolutely phenomenal coffee. So please, to get that discount, 15% off at Run Your Mouth Coffee, you got to join the Pride at $10 or more, and you'll get that discount code and be ready to go. So the second thing I wanted to talk about, Brian and I have put together some really cool new t-shirts at the Lions of Liberty store. And I should say you can get discounts by being a Lions of Liberty Pride member. You're going to get at a minimum a 20% discount in our Lions of Liberty store. So it's another incentive to join the Pride. Our two new t-shirt designs are freaking awesome. One of them came from one of my recent episodes where I said television only exists as filler for pharmaceutical commercials. Well, we made that into a t-shirt. Brian made the design. I love it. And it's for sale at lionsofliberty.store. The second one Brian came up with, it's remarkable too. It says, Big Pharma making myocarditis ariocarditis. It's got the needle on there with the heart. It's really, really a unique design. Sure to catch eyes. So go to lionsofliberty.store and check those out. I want to get to today's interview with my guest today. We're going to be talking about the broken public education system. We're going to be talking about the changing landscape of careers and entrepreneurship and how we can use technology to really leverage our talents and set ourselves apart. So let's get into today's interview. All right, we are live here to the Lions of Liberty Pride, and I am joined here today by Joel Bein. He's the CEO of Career Hackers and founder of New Orleans Chamber of Players. So the way that I found Joel, or I should say the way that he found me, it's one thing that we're going to talk about later. He's going to talk about a way to stand out and really separate yourself in interviews and resumes and things like that. And we'll talk about that when we get to it, but a very unique way to approach someone about coming on a podcast, which I think is really cool. And Joel got started out working with Isaac Morehouse. If you remember, Isaac Morehouse was on Lions of Liberty back with Mark Claire, I believe almost exactly a year ago today. And Isaac has done some revolutionary work with Praxis and Crash, just revolutionizing really the way that businesses are really showing business in an entirely different way, and the idea of getting a job in a different way. So we'll talk about all of that stuff with Joel. I'm looking forward to it. Joel, welcome to Finding Freedom.
Thanks so much, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on the show. And I gave you a little intro about you there, but could you give my audience a little more background on yourself and really what's led you down this path? I mean, we'll talk about Career Hackers and that stuff. But what's led you down this path to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, totally. So I've always been a very passion and purpose-driven person. And my first passion was and is classical music. And I went full into that in end of high school and then chose to study music in college, in undergraduate degree, and studying trumpet, and then eventually fell in love with conducting, waving the baton, and that seed was all planted there at that time of my life, and I followed that very deeply throughout college, eventually pursuing a master's degree in conducting, and eventually starting the group that you mentioned, New Orleans Chamber Players, which is my nonprofit professional level chamber music organization where I conduct a couple of concerts a year, and I've conducted orchestras and bands and wind ensembles and throughout my life. But that was my first passion and went full into that. But when I was in college, I sort of had this other seed planted for a second passion and purpose, which was my philosophy of education. And so I was actually studying officially music education in my undergrad and preparing to become certified to teach music in the K through 12 school system, public school system. And I had chosen that certification pathway partly because I wasn't sure, I wasn't super confident about my musical skills and if I could make it as a performer without having that sort of credential to fall back on, so to speak. At least that was my 17-year-old, 18-year-old like type thinking back then. But I also was interested in working with young people and sort of sharing my passion for music. But I really started thinking about what is education. My sort of critical thinking mind started unfolding in those years. And I was asking myself, while I'm going through this training program, this is a teacher training program that's been around for 100 plus years at this particular college in New York State. And I was like, wait, what is education? How do children learn? What is the best way for that to happen? And I started asking these questions, and I realized pretty quickly that no one else was asking these questions. When I was asking questions about like, is it really the best approach to like just motivate kids by giving them like gold stars and grades and stuff like that in the school system, and realized that those types of questions weren't really welcome. And so I was just started my own sort of journey through education on my own, and eventually came to the School Sucks podcast, which your listeners might know in the sort of liberty world of created by Brett Venat back in 2009. The School Sucks
fellow
podcast.
Pittsburgher. At least he used to live in
right.
Pittsburgh. Not sure if he still does.
Yeah, he's still there. So yeah, I found his podcast in like a month after he started it. In September 2009, I found it. And I was just starting my senior year of college, and I was starting to do the student teaching experience. And so once I found his podcast, everything just, the fire really blew up, and I started obsessing about that topic and learning about John Taylor Gatto and the history of the school system. And so all that's to say that I ended up going and working in the school system for several years throughout my 20s. With that master's degree in the middle of it, I actually ended up working from teaching kids from grade 4 through 12 in 2 different jobs for 8 years.
What was that like working? So working in the school system as you're learning about everything that's wrong with the school system. What was that experience like?
It was quite the sort of dissonance, to be honest. Where I found myself going into the system knowing that I actually wanted the system to be abolished fundamentally, because by the time I had listened to 100 episodes of Brett's show, I was like, oh wait, no, we need to create entirely new paradigms based on free markets and so forth. But I had all this momentum, and I kept going into it, and I weighed the cost benefit, and I decided to still go in. But it was tough to be in that environment when you're surrounded by this culture of coercion, basically, where the whole system is funded through coercion, and then you have the environment of kids being told what to do all day and having very little choice. Now, it was a little bit better for me with my students because it was an arts elective class, so I wasn't forcing geometry down their throats, and many of the kids enjoyed it. But I was still in this greater environment of that compulsory type of atmosphere, and I just didn't believe in the system, and it was really hard to be my true self. Like, it was just, I felt like my salary depended upon me biting my lip and all these things. And so throughout those years, it was quite hard, but I kept kind of, forging my path and developing my worldview, because I didn't necessarily have that all clarified in my early 20s, but it was through Brett's show where I really started getting clarity about philosophy and psychology and my principled worldview. And then fast forward to 2016 is when I found Isaac Morehouse, and he came on School Sucks, and he was talking about praxis and entrepreneurship and this whole possibility of criticizing the system through creativity, through entrepreneurship, and saying, hey, we don't need college to land a job anymore. And that can actually, through it, changing the incentives, if we can make college obsolete, then this K through 12 system can dissolve, and parents and families can see, like, oh, there's new ways to get a quote unquote good job and launch a career. Because that's really the underlying, that's the carrot that's dangling at the end of the K through 12 system, is like, this is how you get a good job, but when we can create new paradigms and say, hey, here's a totally fresh way to launch a career, and not just, there's not two choices of have a good job or just like work fast food. Like, you can launch a career and get a good job without a degree, without all these permission slips, right? But there's all this fear that you're just going to work at fast food the rest of your life if you don't go to college and all these things. So this idea of creating a new option in the marketplace, what Isaac was pitching, was so compelling to me, because I had all this energy. Like, I was all fired up about, not only because by that time I'd been listening to School Sucks for 7 years, and I was like, yes, we need new paradigms, but I was still in the system at that point.
Yeah.
And I was like all this energy for me personally. And so when I found praxis, I just started going 1000% in, like, listening to every podcast that Isaac was on, and reading all his blogs, and just started taking his advice about starting your own blog and building your own brand and building a website, and starting to build a portfolio, and started doing that. I did his 30-day blogging challenge is one thing he suggests to do. And then I started my nonprofit, and I was building that sort of portfolio project for my online brand as well, and trying to create that signal that I could showcase to maybe break in to the private sector and make a career change. So yeah, I mean, to kind of wrap it up and fast forward a little bit more, is eventually I made that. I mean, I was knocking on the Praxis door. I pitched Isaac a couple times. I went out and met him in person, and he knew that I was interested, but I didn't quite like have that value prop there for him. It wasn't the fit, and I didn't quite get opportunities to work for him. But then in 2020, he had built Crash by that point, and Crash being the software tool where you can send a video directly to a company to stand out instead of sending a resume. And this idea of scaling this praxis approach of launching a career without college, and helping people in any stage of life integrate that approach, not just like as a college alternative. So Crash was created right when I was like, all right, you know what, this is it. I'm done with the school system. I was fully ready at that point to make a shift. And I started pitching companies like in the private sector, mainly like sales roles. And I still wanted to work for Isaac ultimately, but I wasn't sure if I was ready. I mean, I just thought, maybe I'll just get some experience in working in another startup company, et cetera. And so I started pitching companies, and having amazing results. This is right in spring 2020. My first pitch was going out like in March 2020. It was quite the time, and but I was still getting results. I was getting all these interviews. I had no sales experience formally, but I was getting like an 80% interview rate for these pitches because it was so rare for a company to get something that was customized and humanized and creative and cut through the noise.
So what types of things were you doing with the pitches that would be different than the normal?
Yeah, so the normal was sending a resume and clicking apply and waiting, maybe doing a little bit of networking. Most people might do a little bit of that, but I was just like, forget the job posting. Let me create a custom video and find a decision maker at this company and email it directly to them and follow up with them until they reply back. So that took a little bit of preparation. So, but not too much. Like you spend, I mean, some companies, depending on which company I was most invested in, I would spend more time preparing than others. But sometimes you just put 30 minutes, 60 minutes in of research just to learn a little bit about the company, what their mission is, what their product is, maybe what their pain point might be, and even just doing some initial research and then being able to speak into a video pitch into the camera and say, hey, I love your mission to XYZ, whatever their mission is, even just reflecting that back in initial part of a video pitch, all of a sudden I mean, the fact that you're sending a video is like making it really colorful to begin with, but then you're articulating to them that you know their mission statement. I mean, it's actually pretty simple. The bar is so low that almost no one's doing this. That if you do that, it's like, wow, this person cares about us. So I would do that.
And just to butt in for a minute, I can speak about this. I mean, you weren't applying for a job to come on this show, but you were asking if you could come on as a guest, and you did something similar by sending a video, and it's the first video I've ever received of anybody asking to come on the show that way. And I mean, I'll tell you, immediately when I saw it was different, before I even heard you speak, I said I want to have this guy on the show because it was so different. But it's amazing because we get so used to in this world of, email is a certain way that you're just expecting to read something, or you're expecting to get clickbait or whatever. And when you get somebody addressing you and talking to you and saying your name and listing things about your company, it's like, wait a minute here. This person is actually interested. This is different.
Oh, it's amazing. And I've been at this for a few years now. It's like the water in which I swim, but then it's still novel for me. So I hired a person to do our new TikTok channel, and she found out about the opportunity, and she sent me a video pitch as well as like 2 free samples of videos for the TikTok, and she totally crushed it, like embodying this mindset. And I experienced from the hiring standpoint, oh wow, like there's no way I'm not talking to this person. And it just blew me away. And like I felt this feeling of excitement and like giddiness because someone was pitching my company that I'm putting all my heart and soul into. And so, yeah, it's such a powerful tool. We just needed to kind of pause and think about how you can be a little bit more imaginative,
Right. So let's talk about career hackers then, because I feel like that's where we're leading towards, right? So how did you end up with the idea for career hackers, and tell us a little bit about the company and what it does?
Yeah, so Career Hackers grew out of Crash, and we rebranded in spring 2022. So so I pitched Isaac in that summer 2020 to work for Crash, and got my foot in the door. And he wasn't hiring. By the way, he wasn't hiring officially. And this is a real revelation to me, that how much potential you have to work at especially a small, fast growing company, even if they're not advertising a position, that you can create a role for yourself. So I kind of like wedged my way in and started wearing a lot of hats with this Crash platform, and doing customer support and doing blog articles, taking over the podcast, creating partnerships. And we were trying to really scale the Crash software tool to as many people as possible. We ran into sort of a bit of an obstacle, recognizing that a lot of people would sign up to use the platform, but then not actually follow through and create the video. And I would do workshops with job hunters, and I'd connect with people, do some coaching calls, and you realize that people just have a lot of people just would have this resistance and this hesitation to doing something different like that. Mm-hmm. And so I really realized, okay, the mindset is number one, and the way that you pitch is number two. So if you can integrate this sort of emboldened, empowered, creative approach of basically letting go of permission, basically the anti-schooled mindset, right? When we go to school, we learn to raise our hands to go to the bathroom and follow all the rules and all these things. Right. And so what we're actually need to do for this mindset and this approach of pitching to scale is to focus on that inner game first and foremost. So that's sort of why we shifted towards Career Hackers as a brand, to focus on media. And our strength has always been content creation and blogs and podcasts, and now doing events, and really just focusing in on sort of the mindset education. And we have a newsletter that's going out every single day called the Daily Job Hunt. And that really started to catch some steam with building that subscriber base. And we've just doubled down on that as well. And so, yeah, it's about supporting people in sort of reactivating their inner creativity and curiosity and empowerment, that sort of individuality that gets schooled out of us, right? Growing up, mm-hmm. We're like, before we go to school, we're asking why, and we're creative, and then we learn to like sit down and shut up and follow the rules. And so what I'm doing now is so focused on helping people like rekindle the curiosity and creativity inside of them, to say, hey, what do you want to make a career change? Maybe, well, what are you curious about? Oh, like maybe you're curious to learn to code. Maybe just how about you do a 30-day project and just test out a course and learn to code, and then you can see how you feel about it and start building your portfolio and get some momentum going. And it's like, it's rekindling that curiosity and creativity that can start to spark people's sense of like their underlying excitement, because ultimately we're trying to help people come alive. Like, our mission is to help people discover and do what makes them come alive, and not just kind of show up. And so many people right now, like the majority of people, are dissatisfied with their jobs. Yeah. And it's like they're more in this cog in a wheel, like just show up, clock in, clock out. And what I want to see is a world where people are actually looking forward to their work because they're aligned with it, and there's a sense of like inner agency and creativity and all those things.
Essentially, and this isn't like a direct comparison, but I think it's definitely close. When I look at the website, the Career Hackers website, you see across the top, fueling your mindset, burn your resume, build social capital, crush the interview, all these different really words and phrases that are not normal for a job hunting website. And essentially what this looks like to me is it's really what people should be learning in high school. I mean, it's, really learning how to, communicate, learning how to package your skills together. Like you talk about building a portfolio so you can actually do what you want to do. Right. And it's just so incredible that what you're having to do, the problem that's being solved with this venture here is one that's been created right by public schools. I mean, You got a conveyor belt of people coming off this assembly line for public schools that don't know how to get what they want. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's it. It all goes back to the school system. The school system is the preparation for the careers, right? So what the new paradigm that we're trying to create with career hackers is to step off the conveyor belt and again embody this mindset, which is basically the antithesis of what you learn in school. And it's deschooling that mindset and learning that you don't need to wait for permission. You don't need to be afraid to fail. I mean, how often do we just implicitly learn that failure is bad, and I might even be punished if you get a red pen marking on your paper in school, or you get the wrong answer on the test, and you learn that like, oh, you got a C-, that's bad, and you might even actually get punished. It's like, and so we learn to play it safe and not take risks and not fail, right? But as we know, when we think about it, like most entrepreneurs and most successful people are the ones who are willing to go for it and learn through failure, right? So many entrepreneurs will fail in their early days but that's the building blocks for their success, right? But what we're taught through the school system is avoid failure, and don't go after what you actually want, and just play it safe and just show up to the job that's going to pay you, So when we can just flip the entire script. So like, yeah, like the language on the website is very intentional to say, take like build social capital. Most people call that networking. And I very rarely use that term because there's this connotation of like, here we go, I'm going to check the box for now I'm supposed to network and get people to help me. No, opposite.
I collected people's business cards. Yes, I did a good job.
I did a good job. I got a sticker. No, like create value and give people value, and then all that's going to work out. So we talk about like write handwritten thank you notes, unsolicited, like invite people on, like one way to create social capital is to start a podcast and invite people on the podcast, and then you give them a chance to tell their story. So like I mean I pitched you on the podcast, but like you're building social capital with me because you are having me on, and I feel nice, and I feel special because I get to tell my story. So then like now we have a connection, and it's not about like measuring how much social capital do I have in my account and like quantifying it. It's just like a framework for like, how do you build value and think about the other party's perspective. So you'll build social capital with a company if you pitch them with a customized video, because you are talking directly to them and their mission, and you feel that excitement. They feel that excitement and everything. So it's about value creation and thinking about, how can I serve other people? How can I benefit other people? Not in a self-sacrificial way, but actually in a self-interested way. Like it will only serve me if I look to create value outside.
Yeah, I forget the quote exactly, but from Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, he talks about being authentic and helping other people. I mean, you're doing it to build a relationship and to help yourself, but if you're doing it in an authentic way to help them, then that's going to shine through. I wish I could remember the actual quote, but I think people get the idea.
He also says something that we like to repeat, which is to be interesting, be interested.
Yes.
So that goes back to following your curiosity. If you want to be remembered by people, ask them questions that are interesting and actually that are, again, authentic to your own curiosity, and then let them have that platform to speak and just be genuinely interested. And so that applies for like meeting a person. That applies to a company. This company is building this product to help make software tools more efficient for companies and then their suite of tools or whatever. Okay, why did this company create this? Like, okay, what problems might they be having right now? What friction points? I'm actually curious. You kind of turn on that muscle that again was extinguished out of you in school because you were just never given the chance to follow your own curiosities. You were just told to just do these assignments that are mandated. But curiosity is about looking inward and asking and starting from that sort of internal motivation. And when you start there, then you start cultivating this mindset.
I 100% agree with that, and it's something that it's a learned behavior. I mean,
Yep.
because like you said, it's not something that we're taught in school. We're kind of taught the opposite. We're not taught to ask questions and be curious and question authority, or even just how to have a conversation. We're really, I mean, none of that is even encouraged in school. You're taught to. It's not a back and forth. I wanted to ask you about, really the current state of the economy. I mean, who knows where it's heading? We know there's been rampant inflation. If we look like year over year inflation from November of 21 or November of 2022 to 21 and to 20, it's something like that 2-year time frame is almost like 16 or 18% inflation per the official numbers. It's probably way more than that. From an entrepreneurial standpoint, and from a standpoint of also kind of on the side of entrepreneurship, like side hustles, creating alternative streams of income, is that something that you talk about with career hackers? Is maybe not just focusing on one career, but diversification of income? Is that something that's a
totally.
focus?
Yeah, the idea of a career is almost becoming obsolete. We use the term career because it's so commonplace in our vernacular, but really you have more and more technological decentralization going on with remote work, for example, and the opportunity to bring in income online and create those side projects and do that e-commerce store or whatever. There's so many different ways to bring in income when you zoom out and you compare it to 1991 or something, and you realize, wait, there's an abundance of possibilities, and it's really just a matter of starting and focusing on something and going from there. So not getting overwhelmed by all the choices, but just choosing something. So yeah, I mean, if you get creative and imaginative, then you can go beyond just having a job, right? At our last event, I interviewed someone, Taylor Pearson, who wrote a book called The End of Jobs. He wrote this back in 2015, and he was kind of looking at the economic trajectory of this whole, basically like 20th century blueprint of, work at a job from 9 to 5 and all that stuff. And he was basically forecasting like all these different economic forces are at play, and there's going to be more and more entrepreneurial opportunity as well as necessity to become entrepreneurial in your mindset, and that it might take more. There's more of a responsibility because you're not just showing up and conforming to this company's mold, but you're creating that sense of self-empowerment and looking at yourself as a company. I'm the CEO of Me Incorporated, we'd like to talk about. And so that means you can pitch your services. Like, you have customers, which are maybe it's a company, maybe and there's different ways to look at it. We have these different words, like you're a full-time employee or you're a contractor, or but these are all just kind of shortcuts. All that really matters is you're trading services to certain degrees, whether that's a certain amount of value that maybe that's only ends up being 10 hours a week. Well, 10 hours a week doesn't actually matter anyway. What matters is value. Right. And so this sort of like 9 to 5 sort of mindset, I think in the next 10, 20 years, we're going to, like 20 years from now, I think that's going to be very, like, it's going to have dissolved quite a bit. Because what actually matters is value creation. So I think right now, in terms of the economy, I think there's an opportunity for people to to get more creative and to tap into a sense of entrepreneurship, and to actually, rather than contracting into a fear state, and so I just got to cling on to this thing this job that I don't like, and hope that I keep it. Like, I would say quit your job, like if you're dissatisfied, and go create value for a company that's interesting to you. Go build a portfolio, do a blog, start documenting new skills you're learning. Go on Coursera or Skillshare, learn about marketing or coding or anything, customer service. There's so much out there on those types of websites to go take a course that's 5 hours, and then do blog posts with screencasts about what you're learning, and you build the documentation for what you are learning, and you become your own credential. Then you can show that when you pitch a company, hey, look, this is what I'm learning. I'm working on this course. So, like, you're showing your growth mindset. You're showing the skills you have. You don't need to just rely on some boring resume. So there's all this opportunity to go say, what am I curious about? What skills could I build? So curiosity, creativity, and then empowerment. How can I go pitch myself, send the video, send that portfolio, and find opportunities, companies that are interesting to you, that are exciting to you. You know, like with my story, it's like I was just obsessed with Isaac's mission, and I've just gone full in with that. Now, you don't necessarily need to find your one obsession, but just start with something that's fairly interesting to you, and that like doesn't suck. You know, if you're at a job that sucks, then you like turn up the volume on like that discontentment you feel, and don't suppress it. Like, really feel that discontentment, and then say, maybe now with this economy is the perfect opportunity to go pitch myself into a new role. That's exciting because companies crave someone who's going to have that sort of forward tilt, that extra 110% type of energy, and creating value without permission. So if you can start integrating this mindset, it might not happen overnight. It didn't happen for me overnight. When I first heard about this type of stuff, of like doing a project for a company for free without them asking you, and that was like, whoa, but that, you know, that's something that you can learn and start building some momentum, and you can start cultivating this entrepreneurial mindset. Even if you don't do it overnight, like, get started with it.
Yeah, and that's something that took me a while to really understand, that doing something for free for someone can be mutually beneficial, because you're kind of taught, like, you know, don't give away anything for free, but
Yeah.
it's sort of that short-term mindset, not looking at the long term, and the opportunities that could create. And even with myself personally, I still do work in a corporate job, but I work remotely for a company on the other side of the country. And I left a job where I was working in a cubicle 9 to 5 that I hated. But by making that change, I've totally freed up and made my life so much more flexible that I'm able to spend more time on a podcast,
Yeah.
and more time on, you know, several different side businesses. So I think there's lots of different ways to approach it. And I mean, I like what you said. You know, if you're in a job you hate, really sit in that. I mean, just sit in that for a minute. Sit in that, you know, disgust that you're in, and really think about why you hate it. What do you hate about it? What are the things you wish you could change? What are the worst parts? Is it the commute? Is it the people you work with? Is it being in an office? And think about things you'd want to change. What would you like? Would you like flexibility with your time? Would you like to work in a totally different field? So I think that's great advice. And if you are going to quit your job, I think sometimes for a lot of people, the best thing they can do is to quit their job, or to get laid off. Because oftentimes that gives people, you know, the initiative and the kick in the pants to make the change that they need to make. But
yeah, you need to do what's best for you, and only you know that. So I always like to give that caveat about advice in general. Is the mother of all advice is to think critically and creatively about your own situation and how that advice applies to you. So I can't tell you to quit your job. You need to decide that. But what I'm saying is like, look at that as a real option and see that there maybe is a lot of potential there. And again, yeah, turn up the volume on that discontentment, because that was my story. It was really starting to get to me in those last couple of years working in the school system. I just remember feeling every time I would walk in the building at the beginning of the day, I just like felt all this crappy feelings in my gut, and like didn't even want to open the door, and it was like this sense of disgust and fury, and basically, and so what I said is I'm going to channel that into creative action, right? So it's rather than I'm going to complain about it, say, what am I going to do to actually empower myself within my own sphere of control? And again, start with just momentum, because this stuff doesn't necessarily happen overnight, of course. And then you don't also don't need to have it all figured out with a plan, with your business plan in place, your career change or your job change plan. Here's everything that's going to happen, and you get it all mapped out. Like, no, just let it be messier than that, and just start building momentum, and you'll know what to do as you get feedback from reality. So I think one of the best things you can do is to start blogging and building that creative muscle. Create every single day, doing something that no one assigned you to do. Then you start getting in that mindset of value creation. I attribute all of my story that I've outlined to the fact that I started a blog in 2016 and took that advice to blog daily for 30 days that changed my life. And you can read I wrote a blog post about that on Career Hackers about that story a little bit. We talk a lot about the value of blogging daily so that you can build the creative muscle, build the portfolio, start building momentum, start building confidence in this value creation mindset. And then you can figure out, okay, now I got that. Look, I did 30 days of blogging, and now I got this portfolio project that's going to help my brand. That's going to help my signal. Okay, now what's the next thing I'm going to do? So the biggest thing is to get started.
Is there anywhere in particular where you would encourage people if they want to start a blog, if they're going to take your advice? I know Substack's big. Is there a particular place where you point people?
Yeah, I mean, we have an article on how to build a website, how to build a blog. All these articles you can search for on Career Hackers. But I would just keep it simple, and you can start WordPress, you can start Weebly, you can start Wix. There's all these website, Squarespace. Like, actually, the first website I ever made was Squarespace, and you can just get started, and they'll make the templates really easy for you. And there's not there's very little to do from a technical standpoint. So like first thing I did was a Squarespace website, eventually changed to WordPress so I could have more flexibility. But see those details aren't, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, now I need to make sure I have everything decided ahead of time. What you can do is just create a minimum viable product. Create the boring, the basic, not boring, but basic, like free Weebly website or whatever, Squarespace, and then just start writing. And then you can decide to be at a better website later, But I do recommend getting a website up, because then you can just start writing right on there, and you don't even need to worry about having an audience. It's just the thing. Like, the thing about blogging is that the value is really about your ability to learn to create and to overcome the fear of publishing something in public. Because that's a huge lesson you learn from blogging, is actually finishing what you write and then publishing it, even if you feel unsure that it's like quote unquote good enough, or what people are going to think about it. Actually, what's probably going to happen is no one's going to read it when you first start. But like, that's okay, because it's still valuable to start building that muscle. And then if you do go pitch a job or an opportunity, then they'll look you up. And if they see, joelbein.com, they see first name, last name.com, and they see you have some something to say, you're signaling. This is what Isaac would talk about a lot when he was building Praxis, and the signaling mechanism is what you're tapping into. What the college degree used to do is be the main signal for whether you're a reputable person. But you can become your own credential and signal on your own through the World Wide Web. And so building that portfolio and that brand with the website and just getting that ball rolling, then you can become your own credential. But yeah, again, the main thing is to just get momentum going, and don't let perfection be the enemy of good, and have that action bias.
I love that. I think that's all fantastic advice. And also, like you said, you started off with a 30-day challenge. So you made a commitment, right, that you're going to blog every single day. Do you think that's important to have a commitment like that? So you're going to do it every single day when you first get started?
I think it's a great way to catalyze you, because it creates a frame where it's just long enough, where it's substantial and it's a challenge, and you're going to grow from it if you execute it. But it's still short enough where your subconscious is like, all right, well, it's only 30 days of my life, and I can do that, right? And then you can decide at the end of the 30 days what to do next. So then it's not just like, okay, now I'm going to become a blogger. And then it's this open-ended, indefinite, oh, I'm going to add this huge thing into my life. And then your subconscious is like, nah, that's too much of a commitment. I'm not going to even start. But when you create the frame and you create that external end game of, say, 30 days, or even just say 14 days, there's no rules. This isn't school, right? You can do whatever you want. If you create the frame, and then your subconscious can be like, all right, I can do that. And then you get this sprint and you start building the muscle. And then what happened for me was I was like, oh, let's keep going. I did it 60 days. I just kept going because it was so exciting. But yeah, it's a great way. When I started my first podcast, I said, okay, my goal is to, because I was trying to start to connect to that whole Praxis world. And I said, I'm going to interview 10 people who finished the Praxis program. 10 participants or alum of Praxis, and that's my frame, right? And that was huge. That was a great way to get myself into the ecosystem, and I ended up building really close friendships with some of those people, and I was following my interests and my excitement, and I just created that sort of that frame once again to help me get started.
So important. I hope people are taking notes on this or starting to do it right now, starting that blog. I wanted to ask you about, so with Career Hackers, you guys have an event coming up soon. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is our second major live event, where we started that in October of 2022, our Supercharger career events. And the first one was a blast of just, that one was 2 days packed of just energizing conversations with entrepreneurs and thought leaders and influencers in the career space, and who are talking about creativity and talking about proof of work and being your own credential and what to do instead of going back to school. And we had almost 1,000 people register for that, and it was so energizing, and just realizing that so many people, I got the opportunity to interview so many of these thought leaders, and I was just energized, reinvigorated myself, realizing that all like the people who have had a legitimate breakthrough and effectiveness in building a solid career, they did it through offering to work for free, or learning on their own, or creating a mock project, and so forth. So anyway, we had our first event, and our second event's coming up. It's going to be just 1 day this time, but it's still going to be substantial. It's February 9th, all day virtual live event, free. You can register at superchargecareer.com. Superchargecareer.com. And we're going to have guests like Ken Coleman, who's the career coach personality with Dave Ramsey, his company. And when we're talking to him, we're going to be talking to a woman named Ana Lorena Fabrega, who is also a former teacher, actually, and now an entrepreneur. And she's working with like Elon Musk's new school that he created, Synthesis School. And we're going to be talking about this. Like, I'm going to talk with her specifically about the schooled mindset and what it actually takes to launch a career and what the future of work really is. And she's really big about creating new paradigms in education, and she also has this background as a teacher. But we're going to be connecting those dots. Like we started in this conversation, but diving in deeper about like, hey, if you really want to really forge your path and future proof your career in the 21st century, you need to look at this mindset conditioning that you basically got in school. Yeah. And start to unhinge that. So I'm going to talk to her and several other speakers. You can see them on the website, and we'll have a live podcast and Q&A, and it'll be a fun time. So we'd love to see people there. If you're all curious to start traveling down a new path, or even just to start equipping yourself for this sort of economic climate where it's easy to fall into that slight fear state, right? But what we're saying is now's the time more than ever is to focus on what's between the ears. And if you can become empowered with the mindset, then you realize that you'll have security, you'll have job security, or whatever you want to call it, because you can always be in that value creation mindset and always be valuable in the marketplace because you've integrated this mindset. So I'm just like, we can talk about like what to say in an interview or how to get a better salary, how to shoot a video pitch. And we're going to have stuff. We're going to talk about that type of stuff. But like what matters at the root of it is that sense of 21st century entrepreneurial type mindset.
Yeah, that's really, it really is a mindset shift. And you talked about, stepping away from the fear, and what causes that fear? What causes the fear is the unknown, the uncomfortable. And in order to get past that, you have to either gain some understanding or a skill or a new way of doing things, so it's not unknown anymore. I think that's really powerful stuff. Joel, I did want to ask you before I let you go if you could share just all of your links where people can get in touch with you. If you can say one more time how people can sign up for that Career Hackers event on February 9th, and anything else that you want to let my audience know about.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's been a blast, this conversation. So the event is superchargecareer.com. And again, that's happening on February 9th. And then Career Hackers is careerhackers.com. And you'll go to the homepage there and you can sign up right on the sidebar for our daily newsletter, the Daily Job Hunt. So like if you like getting this type of mindset juice, if you will, that I've been talking about, then I'm writing that newsletter every single morning, going out 6 days a week, super short. And it's always just a little burst of motivation. So again, you can find that at careerhackers.com. And my website's joelbein.com. Reach out to me. My email address is on there on my website, and always game to hear from people. And I'm here to support you. I'm really, it makes me come alive to help people come alive. Like that's the journey. That's what the journey's been for me. Is a lot of that process that I've talked about is on deschooling my own mind and starting to figure out what actually makes me come alive. I guess the last thing I'll say there is like, it was a process for me to realize that I wanted to go in this new direction, because I was on the track. I had this master's degree. I was on track to I could have gotten a doctorate and become a professor of music, and I had all this
Mm-hmm.
status in that world, and I could have just done that. That was the path that was presented to me. But I realized through my introspection that what really made me come alive was to go forge my own path and make a dent in paradigms and seeking to change the world, right? With these insane school systems and these insane governmental systems. Let's go do something to make a dent on that. So that's all to say is that it was a process over years for me. And so at this place in my story, I'm really fired up to help people and support people in their own journey. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah, Joel, I like the way you put that. Change the world. And I think it's so important. I just want to encourage people again to really, look into career hackers, to look into everything Joel is doing, because I think a lot of the time people in this space, the freedom, liberty space, we kind of get caught up a lot in the politics and the news and the kind of woe is me and the culture and all of this stuff. And that all has its place. But if we're going to actually, like you just said, change the world and have an effect, which we can more so, I think, than any other time in history, more easily, we have the tools at our fingertips. I think this is the way to do it. I think this is one of the ways to do it for sure. So I encourage my listeners to check it out. And Joel, thanks again for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I just want to echo what you just said about that, because I know it's easy to get fired up by looking at the news and so forth. And like you mentioned the inflation numbers earlier in the show, and I was starting to get fired up about that. But then the question is, what can you do with that energy, right? When you get fired up about what's happening, say, what can I do in my own life to change my own life, and then by as a ripple effect, change the world. So thanks so much again for having me, John. I appreciate it.
Good stuff. Joel Bein. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that interview today with Joel Bein. Just a really unique guy. Personally, I enjoyed speaking with Joel, a really thoughtful person. And I love so much when people, instead of just talking about things and bitching about things on Twitter, or saying, well, I wish things were different, then I could do this, or I wish things were different and I could do that, when they actually implement changes and they create systems not only for themselves but for others to help other people to succeed. And I love that Joel is doing that. I really, really want to encourage everyone here to support what he is doing. And you can check out everything that we talked about on the show, all of his projects. You can go to the show notes page at lionsofliberty.com to check all of that out. Really, really had a great time today speaking with Joel. Just want to remind you one more time what I mentioned at the top with the new perk in the Lions of Liberty Pride. That's for $10 and up members. You get 15% off coffee at Run Your Mouth Coffee. The code will be there in Patreon. If for some reason you can't find the code and you're like, I need to buy my coffee, just send me an email, john@lionsofliberty.com. And secondly, the new t-shirt designs, the Big Pharma designs, check them out. lionsofliberty.store. You will not regret it. And that's all I have for today, guys. We got some new listeners today. Some old listeners, of course, are always back. But we are grateful for everyone, especially for our Pride members and for those who share the show and for those who leave a nice 5-star rating and a review at Apple Podcast, especially, because that is best for the algorithm, my friends. But this is John Odermatt signing off for this week. I'll see you all next week, or you will hear my voice next week. I will not see you. You might see me if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble or Odyssey. But enjoy your week. Be safe out there. And always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.